the first step to finding true happiness is allowing in unhappiness.
All right, Tal, thanks for coming on the FitMind podcast.
Thank you, Liam. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I've actually never spoken about squash on the FitMind podcast, but that was a huge part of my life growing up and huge part of your life too. And I was learning that this helped teach you some pretty important lessons about happiness too. So I thought maybe we could start there.
Yeah, sounds great. I was thinking, I don't know if you've come across the book, All I Needed to Know, I Learned in Kindergarten. And it was a bestseller when I was growing up. And I was thinking of writing a book, All I Needed to Learn, I Learned on the Squash Court. Because I did learn many lessons, everything from the importance of hard work, perhaps first and foremost, the importance of failure and learning from failure, concentration, focus, the mind-body connection. So many of the things that I teach today, that I talk about today, that I first and foremost apply in my life, the root, the seed, goes way back to my squash experiences.
Yeah, and I was reading, particularly there's one analogy that you used called the hamburger model that you kind of came across through your squash training. So how does that relate?
Yeah, so before big tournaments, I used to be very strict about what I eat and don't eat. And I remember one particular tournament, I refrained from any junk food, or only ate the healthiest ingredients for a few weeks. And I said, okay, but right after the tournament, win or lose, I'll reward myself with a trip to my favorite hamburger joint. And the day came, the day after the tournament came, and I went to my favorite hamburger joint. And I remember that, that happened 30 years ago. I remember it as if it happened yesterday. I remember walking towards my table by myself. I didn't want to share with anyone. Walking by myself, with the hamburger, 4 burgers, which I got. I played a lot of squash. I had a big appetite. 4 burgers, walking to my table and then sitting down, unwrapping the first one, about to take a bite, and then putting it down. And I just didn't want to eat it. And I couldn't believe, I'd been fantasizing about this meal for weeks, and suddenly I don't want to eat it. And the reason was because I'd felt strong. I felt good. I felt energized. And I didn't want to ruin that with an unhealthy meal. And at that point, I actually came up, weirdly, with my theory of happiness. Because I said to myself, okay, there are actually 4 hamburger types. The first hamburger type is the one I just turned down, which is about being very tasty and unhealthy. So that would be equivalent to experiences that are enjoyable, but have negative long-term consequences. The second hamburger that I could have had would be, perhaps one we associate with a vegetarian burger, maybe, maybe not as tasty, even though today there are very tasty ones, but maybe not as tasty, but healthy. So that would be associated with, and perhaps an unpleasant present experience, but it's good for the future. Then you have the worst burger, which is neither healthy nor tasty, which, obviously, no incentive for eating that. But the ultimate burger would be one that is both healthy and tasty. And I thought, this is the happiness burger, because it captures an experience that I enjoy in the present, as well as something that is beneficial for the long term. And if you think about it, these are our happy experiences. So work, for example, what's a happy work experience? It's when I enjoy what I do day in and day out, and I'm also building something for the future. There is future benefit, or you can change the present experience to pleasure and the future experience to meaning. It's something that I enjoy now that is pleasurable, and I'm building a future. In other words, it's meaningful to me. Or a relationship, there are hedonistic relationships where we just enjoy spending time together, but we're not really building something for the future. The happy relationships are ones where you enjoy the present and you're building a future together. It's good for you now, it's good for you tomorrow.
Yeah, and it occurs to me that we often mistake in that hedonistic quadrant with happiness. I mean, often you hear people say, I'm doing what makes me happy or something, and they're really talking about that hedonism quadrant. And, there's obviously a distinct difference between pleasure and contentness. And to oversimplify the neuroscience, kind of this dopaminergic, quick, short-term rewarding pleasure versus the long-term kind of serotonergic contentness. And so, I'm interested how you define happiness in your research and when you're asking people and trying to study it.
Yeah, first of all, the most common misunderstanding of happiness really is the equating happiness with pleasure. So, I went to the beach while I was so happy. I didn't, I was so unhappy watching that movie. What a waste of time. This is not happiness or unhappiness. Happiness or unhappiness are about a longer term aggregate of experiences. Specifically, happiness I define as whole person well-being. Whole person well-being. And whole person means you look at spiritual well-being, you look at physical well-being, you look at intellectual well-being, you look at relational, interpersonal well-being, and finally you look at emotional well-being. So yeah, emotion is part of happiness, but it's just one part of happiness. You have to look at it as a multi-dimensional construct. So spiritual well-being would be about finding meaning in life. Physical well-being would be about exercise, would be about nutrition, would be about sleep and recovery. Intellectual well-being is about learning and curiosity. That there is research came out, which I think is fascinating, showing that people who are curious, who learn a lot, actually live longer. So it contributes to our longevity, to our immune system. So that's intellectual well-being. Relational, interpersonal well-being, number one predictor of happiness. Quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And finally, emotional well-being is about dealing with painful emotions and cultivating pleasurable emotions.
Yeah, and it occurred to me that this happiness was a subject that we didn't always have to study for most of human history. It was just kind of do what makes you feel good, and that's going to increase your chances of survival and reproduction. And now we have this luxury to be philosophers and think about, all right, what am I actually here for, and what actually makes me happy. And I think part of the problem is our brains are really maladapted to our environment. So they often, what gets us kind of that short-term pleasure is at odds with the long-term fulfillment. So I'm curious, what would your advice be in terms of finding that ideal quadrant? Like, what are some of your tips for just being able to really seek the good stuff?
Yeah. So to me, the first step to finding true happiness is allowing in unhappiness. Because again, the misunderstanding happiness as just pleasure is not just misleading, it's also very harmful. Why? Because then we do not embrace and accept difficult experiences. Difficult experiences are part and parcel of every life. We cannot hope to be happy. We cannot grow, develop without the experience of pain or suffering or disappointment or sadness. These are natural human emotions, and they are important human emotions. And when we begin our journey with the assumption that it's possible to be exempt of painful emotions, we're starting off on the wrong foot. We're bound to be unhappy. So the first step is really embracing, giving ourselves the permission to experience the full range of human emotions. So that's, first. Then there is the importance of the mind-body connection. Growing up, I played squash, and I think perhaps the most important gift that I received from that is appreciating sports and making it an integral part of my life. Even today, after decades that I hadn't been playing squash, I still exercise regularly. And that's very important. In fact, there is research showing that regular physical exercise has the same effect on our psychological well-being as our most powerful psychiatric medication. Regular physical exercise is key, absolutely key to happiness. And then there is, of course, relationships. There was a study that by now is quite famous, called the Harvard study, where researchers looked at Harvard students. This was back in the 1930s, and they followed them as well as members of the community outside of the university for a period of 75 years. So by the end of the study, most of the participants were no longer alive. And after 75 years and collecting quite literally millions and millions of data points, researchers asked the question, which was, what is the number one predictor of happiness? They didn't, what is the only predictor? There are many predictors, but what is the number one predictor of happiness? And the answer was relationships. Quality time we spend with people we care about and who care about us. And interestingly, it didn't matter what kind of relationships, meaning for some it was a romantic relationship that they enjoyed throughout their life. For others, it was their extended family. For others, it was their religious or non-religious community. And for others, it was colleagues at work. But you had people who were close to you, who you could share your joys and your sorrows with. And then they asked the second question: what is the best predictor of physical health? And again, based on the millions of data points that they collected throughout the 75-year study, they came to the same conclusion: relationships, number one predictor of physical health. They matter a lot. And unfortunately, in today's world, more and more people are relegating relationships from the high place that they deserve in our hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, actually, just yesterday, my brother sent me a video of a guy who had posted a video on YouTube, and it was called "Why I Decided to Live Like a Monk." And he was proud of the fact that he was just so focused on his career and building this multi-million-dollar business that he didn't have time for relationships with friends or family, because he only focused on what mattered. And it just occurred to me that this was a completely unexamined life. I mean, the guy just had not thought about what is actually going to bring him fulfillment, and had fallen into kind of this myth that success is the great determinant of happiness, which I think we can unpack in a little bit. First, I just wanted to ask on that last piece about relationships. So right now, we're talking during this COVID-19 pandemic, and there's this idea of social distancing, which I recently read. Like someone said, it should be called physical distancing, because we're not trying to be socially distant.
Yeah.
But so how can we still foster these important relationships? I was reading a psychologist, Robin Dunbar, was saying that being face-to-face over like a video chat only slows the rate of decay of a relationship, and you actually need to be in person to really foster that relationship. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but how can we be cultivating relationships mobily or virtually?
Yeah, look, ideally I would be telling you, get out there and meet people, interact with people, limit your online time, and that virtual relationships are no substitute for real relationships. That's what I would be telling you in normal times, but these are not normal times. And cultivating or sustaining a relationship online is a lot better than doing nothing. And ideally, what you want to do is have intimate conversations online. And again, it's not the same as, sitting across from one another, and um, you know, and you can't hug online, and hugs are important, certainly in the context of intimate relationships. But we do what we can, and and um, and interestingly, I must say I've been pleasantly surprised. Again, not because I want the world to remain as it is. I crave a return to normalcy. But given the limitations, this is a lot better than nothing. And I'm very glad we have the technology through which we can connect.
And yeah, what about the physical contact piece? I mean, that's one of the things you talk about is so important, and we're actually, getting certain hormonal responses from that are very beneficial.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is very important. I mean, you have research showing that, children who are deprived of touch do not develop physically and psychologically as do children who do receive touch, from their parents, from their caregivers. Having said that, we can also survive and even thrive with some deprivation. What do I mean? So, let's look. So touch is a physical need, but let's look at another physical need, which is as important as touch, and that is sleep. Now, sleep is important. Getting your, depends how old you are, your 7-8 hours a night of sleep is very important for development, cognitive development, emotional development, for well-being, for physical health and mental health. So it's very important. Having said that, we can go for months without getting enough sleep. And for example, if you have a baby, you're not going to sleep that much for a few months. If you're serving in the military and you're going through basic training, you're not going to sleep that much for a while, and that's okay. We can deal with that deprivation. However, if that becomes the norm, meaning it's not just for 2 or 3 or even 6 months, but it's for 2, 3, or 6 years, then it becomes problematic. So if this current situation continues for years, we're in deep trouble. Now, if we're deprived of touch for a few months, we can deal with it. Unpleasant, and most people are not at their best, far from it, but we can deal with temporary deprivation.
So even before this COVID-19 crisis, and actually I'm interested maybe how this is affecting our happiness. I don't know if there have been any studies so far, but safe to say that it's causing a lot of stress and anxiety for a lot of people. But even before that, our country, well, America and a lot of other wealthy Western countries, despite our GDP and our growth in wealth, are not as happy as you would expect. So yeah, let's get into kind of that myth that wealth creates happiness.
Good. So, the relationship between wealth and happiness is a complex one, and for many people, an unintuitive one. So money doesn't contribute to happiness unless it's for our basic needs. So if you have a person who doesn't have enough food on the table and shelter, and you give them an extra $1,000 a month, of course that will make them happier, a lot happier. However, once basic needs are met for food, shelter, we're talking the foundation of Maslow's hierarchy. Once these are fulfilled, additional money doesn't make people happier. And if we did, then the world would be full of very wealthy and happy people. And wealthy people are not necessarily happier by any stretch. The relationship, though, is more complex than that, because when you give people money, you give them $1,000 extra discretionary income. They don't really need it for basic needs. What do they do with it? Do they buy things, or do they buy experiences? Meaning, do I upgrade my car? Or if I have more money, do I buy a bigger house, or do I go on a vacation? And it turns out that most people would say, I would rather get the house or the car, because that's going to stay with me for many years, whereas vacation will be over in 2 weeks. It turns out that that would be if you're thinking about happiness, that would be a wrong choice. That experiences actually contribute to our happiness short-term as well as long-term. Why? Because we also have memories, because relationships are strengthened as a result of going on vacation together and so on. And again, I'm talking averages in general, not in every case, of course. So using our money for experiences rather than things is better. Giving, generosity, one of the best ways to increase levels of happiness is to give. So using our money towards that end is productive if we're thinking about happiness. So that's money and happiness. Now, you mentioned countries. You know, when you look at the happiest countries in the world, what do you find? It's not the US. US is, you know, somewhere in, middle and up. It's not the UK or Germany, even lower. It's not the Asian miracles like Singapore and Korea, pretty low down. What countries do you find the happy at the top of there? It's countries like Colombia, Costa Rica, Denmark, and Norway, Israel, Australia. Not the countries you would expect necessarily. You know, certainly, you know, Colombia has its fair share of problems. Israel, you know, where I'm originally from, has its fair share of challenges. So why these countries and not other countries? Well, when they looked at the happiest countries in the world, the single common characteristic that they found, and again, that's beyond these countries providing for basic needs. So very poor countries are not generally happy countries. But beyond providing for basic needs, what makes these countries the happiest countries in the world? Social relations, social support, relationships, once again. And unfortunately, in the US, priorities have been distorted over the last 50, 70 years. Mm. I find it, by the way, also, I did some research last year in Latin America. Mm. Latin America is the happiest region in the world. Mm. However, what I also found there was that the younger generation was not necessarily happier than the younger generation elsewhere in the world. In other words, it was still the happiest region in the world because of the older generation. Why? Because the younger generation emphasized relationships much less, or at least face-to-face relationships much less than the older generation did and does.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in the US, we're certainly still very social beings, and we're certainly still communicating a lot. And I think a lot of that communication has switched to online social media communication, but a lot of it is kind of look at me communication. You know, it's the relationship is kind of based on like you're applauding someone for them showing their accomplishments or, you know, taking a photo of themselves or this or that. And so it's less about this kind of community aspect and more about, you know, look at me and then trying to one up each other and always kind of comparing yourself to other people that are higher up on this chain. It seems like that's kind of a cultural thing.
Yeah, that is a cultural thing. And also, you know, in terms of priorities. So, a book came out just a few years ago by Bronnie Ware. That's W-A-R-E. And the name is the Top 5 Regrets of Dying. And Bronnie is a nurse, and she was mostly tending to people who are terminally ill patients, people who are about to die, and she spoke to many of them, and they expressed their regrets, and the regrets usually revolved not around I didn't make enough money or I didn't climb high enough in the organizational chart. It was I didn't spend enough time with people I care about and who care about me. I didn't pursue what I believed in, my passions, in other words, meaning, enough. I very often work too much. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not against hard work. I work very hard. I think that work can provide many people with a deep sense of meaning and purpose. The thing, though, is that it shouldn't come at the expense of spending quality time with our loved ones.
Now, when you're studying happiness, how do you, this is people probably have their own subjective interpretations when you ask them, are you happy? You know, someone might, just based on the context or how they were raised, have a very different idea of what that means. And I've taken some of the tests on Martin Seligman's tests on like the UPenn website, but I'm just really curious, you know, how do you really pinpoint that? Like, do you know if you're asking a different country about happiness that they're understanding it the same way?
Yeah, you know, there are many ways to test happiness. And, you know, I always tell my students that the real value of testing happiness is to raise levels of awareness. Because if I'm testing it and thinking about it, then I'm also thinking about how can I raise my score from a 7 to a, you know, 8. So that's the real value, because, you know, measuring happiness is challenging. Today, we are better at it than we were, because today we have more sophisticated measures. You know, today we know what a happy or a happier brain looks like. We know what a depressed brain looks like. We know what a compassionate brain looks like. So these are all things that researchers are using today, whether it's fMRIs or, you know, a little bit less sophisticated EEGs or PET scans or galvanic skin response. So you can test a lot of, or blood tests. So today you have more physiological tests that can tell you and give you a picture of what the person is feeling, experiencing. But ultimately, you know, it's very difficult to define happiness. And, you know, many people say that happiness is like beauty. Difficult to define, but you know it when you see it. So with happiness, you know it when you experience it. And for me, that most important thing is to think about how you can make progress. Because, you know, many people today ask me, Tal, are you happy today? Because, you know, I got into this field because of my unhappiness, not because everything was going well. So people ask me, so today, 30 years forward, are you finally happy? And my answer to that is, I don't know how to answer that question. Because I don't think there is a point before which one is unhappy, after which one is happy. So I don't think it's a binary 0-1. I can certainly say that today I'm happier than I was 30 years ago or even 10 years ago. At the same time, I certainly hope that 10 years from now, I'll be happier than I am today. In other words, it's a continuum, it's a journey. And it's a journey that ends when life ends.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. So you talk in your book about the importance of silence, and I'm curious, I mean, what are your thoughts on meditation, or, you know, do you have other thoughts on how to cultivate that silence that you say is so important?
Yes, so meditation is very important. The thing, though, is that people need to expand their view of meditation. You know, meditation is not just sitting down in lotus position, you know, eyes closed and focusing on, you know, on the source of the universe, or even just on the breath going in and out. Meditation is present moment awareness, and present moment awareness is associated with a whole list of very good outcomes. From a happier brain, it actually changes the way our brain functions. A stronger immune system, calmer disposition, healthier, better relationships, more success, you know, you name it. You know, there's meditation has been shown to be a causal factor in all these variables. But what is meditation? So yes, it can be sitting down and focusing on the air going in and out. It can also be present moment awareness, listening to music. It can also be yoga. It can also be conversation with another person, really being present. You know, that would be more informal rather than formal meditation. So being present is the key to deriving all these benefits. So I do strongly recommend a formal meditation practice. What is that formal meditation practice for you? Well, find it through trial and error. You know, for many years, I couldn't sit down and meditate, you know, focusing on my breath or just being mindful. My form of meditation for years was having ADHD. For me, the best form of meditation was yoga, because I was actually moving while doing it, and music. And then in my early 40s, you know, I started getting into breath meditation and just general mindfulness and doing that. But now during the coronavirus pandemic, I find that it's very difficult for me to just sit down and meditate. So I went back to music and yoga much more. So experiment with it, try it, but remember that there isn't one size fit all, and remember that there is a great deal of benefit to present moment awareness, and work with these two facts.
Yeah, those are all really good points. And, everyone's mind is different. So there's going to be a different meditation technique that's right for them at the right time. And there are over 800 different types of meditation, according to Jack Kornfield. So there's many different methods out there and tools, and it's not just following the breath. There's many. But one of the things that I think is so powerful about it, some of these metacognitive meditation practices, is that you're sitting down and observing how the mind works while it's working. And to me, like that, coupled with reading about it in a book, like you can read about all these cognitive biases, but then if you're not observing them in real time, you might not catch yourself actually doing them, or you might not realize how the mind's working in those ways by observing it up close. And I think it was some of your work I was reading where you quoted Abraham Maslow, where he said, if you look into the depths of your own mind, you really look into the depths of every mind. Yes. And, I thought that was really powerful, and just really something that I think about when I meditate is like everything I'm learning about myself, I'm learning about how other minds work too, and allowing myself to create better relationships.
Exactly. Maslow talked about it. Emerson talked about it. The Dalai Lama talked about the fact that the best way of studying others is studying ourselves, because our mind is the only one that we have direct access to. And given that we're much more similar than we're different, by learning ourselves, we also learn others. Again, not to minimize individual differences or, of course, cultural differences, and yet learning about ourselves teaches us a lot about others.
Right. Yeah. I feel like we all have this kind of base layer of evolutionary software, and that is the same cross-culturally and independent of your conditioning. So lastly, if you could change one thing about American society to improve our happiness, what would it be?
I'll take two if you don't mind.
Go for it. Even better.
The first thing, I would introduce the idea of the permission to be human across the culture. I'll do it through, by teaching in organizations, through the media, in schools. The idea that painful emotions are part and parcel of every life, because the self-help and new age ethos that has really taken over North American culture falsely communicates that the ideal life is a life devoid of pain and suffering, and once we accept and allowing in unhappiness, we are better prepared to experience happiness. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as I've talked about before, emphasis on relationships, on real relationships. I wouldn't institute this as law, because I'm not for forcing people to do things. However, just short of that, I would introduce the idea of cultivating real relationships, spending real time with real people, much more often, much more of the time.
Wonderful. Well, listen, thanks for those tips, and really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.